Right. Thanks again, Prof, for joining us at Anchored in Law. Now, President Thabo Mbeki, during his presidency, made a speech in which he described South Africa as comprising two nations.
Mhm.
And I know he came under enormous flack in the media for that. He described one as well off and white, and another one as relatively poor and black. Now, you do reference The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens in your book, and that's why I thought let me segue this question into our conversation. Looking at South Africa now, I don't know, 15, 20 years since Thabo Mbeki's time, or maybe sooner than that, would you say South Africa still comprises two cities? Would you say South Africa is a tale of two nations?
Now, say it's a tale of multiple nations. It's no longer just two nations, and it's no longer just black and white. You know? And obviously, I'll give you an example now. If you look at the matric results and the pictures that you see, it is clear that the multiple nations with vestiges of apartheid still reflect what we see. You know, the private schools still do better than public schools, for example. And you can probably go and do the demographic accounting as to who are in the private schools. It's no longer just one race, it's a mix. It has become a mix, you know. We do have a sizable black middle class now who would actually comfortably sit on the other nation that was traditionally represented as being white. You know, there are lots of black people who are there, and black in a general term. You know, Africans, Indians, and colors. You know, and if you actually slice that, you realize that depending on their attitude towards education.
Well,
I think
there
that
is, sorry to interrupt you, Prof. There is, of course, some skepticism about the existence of a black middle class. It's been said by some that the so-called black middle class is 2 or 3 salaries away from poverty. That if they were not to get their salary for 3 months or 4 months running, they cease to be to be middle class. What would you say to those skeptics?
that is actually the definition of a middle class. The middle class is a person who cannot stop working, whether it is in England or it is in America, or it is in the middle class are those people who actually survive mainly because of salary. If you take away the salary, 3 months later, they are going to be gone. If they are not gone in 3 months, they will be gone in 4 months. If they are not gone in 4 months, they will be gone in 6 months. You know? So, whereas the bourgeoisie are the people who don't actually have to work. The social structure of society allow them to extract the wealth, the work of other classes. So now to answer your question, yes, the black middle class is not big enough, and we need to do something about that. It has to be big. And the only way we are going to grow the black middle class is actually to grow our economy. And this is the part of the equation that people don't quite understand. Because we have 60 million people. It makes no sense that Australia, with less than half of our population, has to be 4 times wealthier than us. More money in Australia, four times more money produced per year in Australia than South Africa. Makes no sense. It makes no sense that Canada, which is again half of our population, has what 5 times our total GDP, So we have to grow this economy. We have to grow this economy to grow this middle class.
Yes,
the economic.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Prof. How do we do that when we've heard, again, I'm sure he's not the only source of the information, from President Thabo Mbeki again, has been fighting this battle of the illicit capital flows out of the country. And you've also had multinational mining companies who take reportedly, while I argued a case in which I dealt with something similar, who take the wealth that they make out of the country and export it to the countries of their origins. I'm not going to name specific companies. So how does one grow the economy when you're facing challenges of that kind, illicit flows of capital, and the taking out of the wealth made in South Africa and exported to the multinational countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to make South Africa an attractive place to be. I mean, as university, I am concerned. When I was an undergraduate student in North America, there was a time when I was out there, I realized that South Africans actually are very confident of their institutions. Even the richest South Africans were sending their children to study in South Africa. I think I hear now that wealthy people have started sending their kids to study overseas. You were just telling me that your daughter, because you are an SC, a man of impressive financial means, is thinking about.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
is thinking about the United States, And then we have to find out why is that. Because if they start sending their kids outside, it means they are not going to invest in our institution. If they are not confident, we have to restore confidence in our economy. We have to tighten the laws of exchange laws and so on and so forth, so that you can't just move money without necessarily an investment plan that works for the country. We have to do that. We have to deal with issues of crime. We have to deal with issues of corruption. We have to deal with issues of globally, by the way, because this money is being taken elsewhere. We know that there are places where this money is taken to, where they don't ask where you got the money. Where they don't ask whether you got the money.
All right. So Prof, just in closing on this question, can I press you and ask you, in a word or two, how would you suggest we grow the South African economy so that the Black middle class becomes more entrenched, more secure, and not be 2 or 3 monthly salaries away from poverty?
Firstly, we need to expand education, especially in Black communities, because in many ways, especially when you go to rural areas, we are leaving people behind. Secondly, we need to industrialize South Africa. South Africa needs to industrialize. And it cannot industrialize adequately if you are going to leave the African people behind. And I'm going to specifically talk about the African people because in many ways they are excluded from the little industrialization that we have in the country. We need to get them. And there are many things that we need to do. We need to have tax incentives to get companies to invest in South Africa. the same way we did for the motor, for the automotive industry. We need to to get our governance right. We need to get our governance right to ease the cost of doing business in South Africa, if I were to use the words of our former president, Thabo Mbeki. The ease of doing business in South Africa must be increased. We need to get the financial bodies that take risks. Our entire financial system is based on preservation of wealth rather than investing that wealth to expand the economy. We need to, and I don't have to go through the trillions of dollars of rands that we know can be invested that are not being invested.
Yes, no, thank you for that, Prof. The last question in this session, before we go to the next segment that deals with technology and professions. The last question is a bit tricky. Well, tricky for me. It's tricky for me to ask, and I would imagine it's tricky for the person to whom it is posed to answer, but do please try your best. One of the challenges, or a duo of challenges that I see South Africa face, is the challenge of growing the economy, as we've just discussed. But there's another which is equally important. For some, it may be more important, and that is the challenge of social cohesion. That's where things like racism and intolerance, whether it be racial intolerance or homophobia or religious intolerance comes in. How, in your view, can these two coexist? In other words, how do you achieve both of them without compromising the one or the other?
Well, I think we need to deal with the ills of society. I think we need to deal with the ills of society quite aggressively. And as a head of a university, I know all the ills of society, whether it is racism, whether it is gender-based violence, whether it is discrimination of any sort, actually happen in campuses. So the big question is, how do we deal with all these ills of society to build a cohesive society that is a precondition for economic growth, for higher economic growth? Well, we need excellent leaders at all levels of our society. You and I and many other people must be consumed about finding solutions to the ills that happen in our society. We must participate in school governing bodies. We must organize camping and educational activities in our community. Today, I was in my high school and I pointed out at an individual called Dr. Mugwebo, who used to read for us every Sunday. When I think of Julius Caesar, when I think of Macbeth, it was read to me, not in the classroom the first time, but by a member of our community who gathered young people and started reading for them. And the impact of that on me, certainly, is actually quite extensive. I can't even measure it. So we need to lead. And secondly, we need to have good ethics. Issues of corruption are issues of ethics. Are ethics in our curriculum? And so on and so forth. Thirdly, we need to have a society that understands itself. At the University of Johannesburg, all our 50,000 students have to take Africa Insights module to understand African literature, to understand African politics, to understand African economy. The Africa by Bus project that has taken 15,000 students to no more than 8 different countries by bus, including Kampala and Zambia and Zimbabwe, is another way of opening our people's minds so that they are ready to tackle the problems that you have just indicated. There's no formula. There's no formula. There's just best practice that we need to follow.
All right, Prof. Just in closing on this question and on this segment, you and I not so long ago discussed growing the economy, and you said you can't exclude people from participating in the economy if you wish to grow it. So I'm going to make a proposition to you. You tell me whether you agree with it or you disagree with it. And the proposition goes as follows. It's not complicated. Or let me phrase it this way, in order to grow the South African economy, you cannot exclude the majority of South Africans from participating in that economy not on the demand side, but on the supply side of the economy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Then thank you, Prof. We now move to the next segment. It's likely to be the final segment because I've combined 2 segments on the leadership front. We're now going to move to technology and professions. So we'll take a short break and then we'll resume there.